Before you begin, this story is a journey into darkness, where fear is not just a reaction, but a part of you, lurking, waiting to consume you. Escape is an illusion. The voices, the figures, are not mere imagination. Once you step in, there's no turning back. The nightmare has already begun. There is no waking up. Claire Montgomery was a 29-year-old history professor. She taught at Harvard University, specializing in early American colonial history, Civil War-era politics, and obscure cult rituals. Known for her calm demeanor and logic-driven life, Claire masked a deep personal scar. Her father, Dr. Richard Montgomery, had vanished without a trace when she was just 16. Since then, he'd never been seen or heard from again. The disappearance left a lasting wound, especially on her younger sister Sarah, who was later diagnosed with schizophrenia and had been struggling with it ever since. One quiet autumn afternoon, Claire received a letter in her office. The envelope was old-fashioned, sealed with wax, and stamped in a way that made it look like something from another century. It was from a notary in Louisiana. Inside, a single message. Dear Claire Montgomery, your father, Doctor. Richard Montgomery is deceased. According to his final will, the Eliodora estate is now legally yours. However, the estate cannot be transferred unless one full night is spent within it. Claire froze. The last known sighting of her father had been 13 years ago in a small town near the Mexican border. And now he was dead, leaving behind a mysterious mansion in Louisiana. Her logical mind resisted, but something old and wounded in her pushed her to go. She convinced Sarah to come along. Sarah had a bad feeling about it from the start, but Claire hoped the trip might bring some closure for both of them. When they arrived in Louisiana, they left the city behind and followed a narrow road that twisted deep into the swamplands. The trees grew thicker, the air heavier. Eventually, they reached a pair of rusted iron gates, barely standing on crooked hinges. A plaque overhead read, Eliodora, 1851. Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. There's something wrong with this house, Claire. It's not just old, it's alive. Claire ignored the chill crawling up her spine and pushed open the gate. The moment they stepped inside, the air changed. The wooden floors beneath them felt damp, groaning with every step like the house was sighing awake. They decided to spend the first night in separate bedrooms. Claire, ever the scholar, wandered into the old library. There she found journals written in her father's unmistakable handwriting. Dozens of volumes, each more erratic than the last. The pages were smeared, frantic, like the ramblings of a mind on the edge of madness. One sentence stood out on a crumbling page. Eliodora is not made of stone and wood. It is a being. Its name is Azrael. As Claire read the final word, a piercing scream tore through the house. It came from Sarah's room. Claire ran. She found Sarah standing, trembling, her hands pressed against the wall, writing something over and over with her fingers. He's here, the child of shadows. Sarah's voice wasn't her own. It was deep, echoing, unnatural. Claire's heart dropped into her stomach. Eliodora wasn't just a house. It was a mouth waiting to close. And now, Claire was inside it. The morning sunlight broke through the grime-covered windows, but it brought no comfort. Claire hadn't slept. After dragging Sarah to bed and locking the door behind her, she'd stayed awake in the hallway outside her sister's room, gripping a rusted fireplace poker like it was a sword. Sarah had finally calmed down, murmuring in her sleep. But her last words before dozing off, "He watches from the black corners," refused to leave Claire's mind. She made coffee in a dusty old percolator she found in the kitchen. The water came out brown even before the grounds touched it, but she didn't care. Her hands shook as she poured the first cup. As Claire sipped, she noticed deep gouges in the wallpaper of the hallway across from her. Thin, deliberate lines, 5 at a time, like claw marks. She dropped the mug. It shattered, splashing hot liquid across her shoes. Sarah hadn't been outside her room, and there were no animals here. At least, there shouldn't have been. She opened Sarah's door slowly. Sarah was still sleeping, her breath shallow, a thin stream of dried blood under one nostril. The room stank of sulfur and something Claire couldn't name. Something like damp earth and decay. There were scratches on the walls in here too. Claire backed out. She needed answers. Back in the library, she combed through her father's journals. One entry, dated 5 days before his disappearance, read, "There's a presence in the West Wing. At night, I hear pacing, scratches, whispers. Azrael doesn't show itself, but it hungers. I think it's growing stronger. Feeding." Claire slammed the book shut. She needed to see that wing. The West Wing was sealed with 2 heavy oak doors chained together from the outside. The chain looked new, polished, almost wet. She shivered. Breaking the lock felt like betrayal, like cracking open a tomb. Inside, dust danced in shafts of light, but something about the stillness felt wrong. The air was warmer, thicker, a smell of copper. There were children's drawings on the walls, stick figures, red crayons splashed everywhere. But the children weren't smiling. They were screaming, their eyes black holes. Each picture signed with the name Azrael. Suddenly, a sound behind her, a dragging noise, like something pulling itself across the floor. Claire spun around. Nothing. But the door. It had closed, and something was breathing on the other side. Claire stood frozen in the center of the West Wing, her breath sharp in her throat. The door had shut, not slammed, closed gently, as if someone or something had carefully pushed it. She reached for the handle. It wouldn't turn. Panic surged. She jiggled the knob, kicked the base, pounded. The silence that answered her was thick and purposeful. Behind her, the dragging sound began again. Slow, wet. It echoed through the wing, bouncing off the crumbling wallpaper and warped floors. Claire turned, her back pressed to the sealed door. The hallway stretched into darkness, lit only by flickering wall sconces that hadn't been lit a moment before. She had no choice. She started walking. The air got heavier the farther she moved in, like stepping underwater. Each breath was a labor. Her phone, of course, had no signal, but she held it anyway, using the flashlight to cut through the gloom. At the end of the corridor was a door painted black. Unlike the rest of the house, it had no dust, no mold. It looked freshly painted. Claire pushed it open with her shoulder. Inside was a massive bedroom. At least, it used to be. Now it was something else. The walls were lined with mirrors, dozens of them. Large antique ones, small cracked ones, some with ornate golden frames, and others crooked and hanging by a thread. But they all reflected something different. Claire stepped inside. In the first mirror, she saw herself, but not as she was. Her reflection stood smiling, eyes pitch black, blood dripping from her fingers. She turned to the next. In that one, Sarah was tied to a chair, weeping. A shadow stood behind her, tall and impossible in shape. Claire spun around. There was nothing behind her, but the mirrors didn't lie. In the center of the room stood one mirror larger than the rest, shaped like an archway, its frame carved with symbols Claire didn't recognize. The glass didn't reflect at all. It was black, dead black, and it rippled. Something on the other side was moving. Claire stepped closer. She didn't want to. Her body screamed at her to run, but the mirror pulled at her like gravity. Then, a hand slammed against the glass. Long fingers, nails sharp as glass. The skin blistered and wet, like it had been soaking in formaldehyde. Claire screamed, stumbling backward into a smaller mirror which shattered instantly. Blood dripped from her arm. The black mirror began to hum. Not a sound exactly, more like vibration, a frequency her ears couldn't process, but her bones could feel. The mirror cracked, once, twice. Then it split open, not like glass breaking, but like skin tearing. A mouth opened. It didn't speak. It exhaled, and Claire's vision blurred, the world around her swimming like water down a drain. She collapsed to the floor, gasping, and saw, just for a moment, a face staring out of the mirror. Her father, but not as she remembered him. His face was stretched, wrong. His smile was too wide, and his eyes had been hollowed out. Then everything went black. The house didn't sleep, not truly. Claire realized that the moment she blinked herself awake, covered in cold sweat, heart hammering like she'd run a marathon. She'd fallen asleep in the hallway outside the West Wing, God knows how, but the nightmare still clung to her like cobwebs. In it, she saw her father hanging from the rafters of a tall, unfamiliar room. His eyes had been wide open, smiling, whispering things she couldn't understand. Claire stood up, her neck aching from sleeping upright. The entire house was dead silent, unnaturally so. No creaks, no wind, not even rats. She went to check on Sarah. The bed was empty, sheets torn, scratches, new ones, gouged deep into the walls. Panic rose fast and hard in her chest. Claire screamed her sister's name, but the sound seemed swallowed by the mansion's rotting walls. She ran through every room on the ground floor, then up the grand staircase 2 at a time. Doors flew open, empty, dust everywhere. The chandeliers above her trembled like something had passed beneath them moments ago. Then she heard it, a soft thud, above her, in the attic. Claire had never seen the attic door until now. It was at the far end of the 3rd floor hallway, a trapdoor with a rotting pull cord that looked like it hadn't been used in decades. She reached for the cord. It was wet. She pulled anyway. The attic ladder groaned as it extended downward, trembling under its own weight. Claire climbed slowly, every step sounding like it echoed through time. The attic was massive, black. The only light came from a cracked circular window, casting a pale crescent across the wooden floor. And there, in the middle of it, was Sarah, naked, kneeling, her back to Claire. Around her were hundreds, no thousands, of dead flies, covering the floor like a black carpet. "Sarah," Claire whispered. No response. Claire moved closer. Her sister's shoulders were twitching. No, shaking, crying. She placed a hand on her back, ice cold. Sarah turned around slowly. Her eyes were rolled back. Her mouth was hanging open, but no breath came out. Blood dripped from her ears. Then, in a voice not hers, too deep, too wide, she said, "He is almost born." Claire stumbled back, nearly slipping on the swarm of crushed insects. Behind Sarah, something moved in the shadows. A shape that didn't belong in the geometry of this world. Long arms, no legs, no face, just a slit where its head should be, pulsing and grinning. The attic walls groaned, not from age, but pressure, like the house itself was inhaling. Claire grabbed Sarah by the arms and pulled. Her sister screamed, not from pain, but in protest, like a child being torn for its mother. They tumbled down the attic ladder. Claire didn't stop. She dragged Sarah through the hallway, down the stairs, back into the light. Only when they reached the entrance hall did the screaming stop. Sarah looked up at her, blank, confused. "Claire, where are we?" Claire couldn't speak. She couldn't breathe. Because the house was no longer still. It was smiling. Claire hadn't told Sarah about what she found in the West Wing. Not about the children's drawings. Not about the thing that had breathed through the door once it shut behind her. She couldn't. Her sister was barely stable as it was. Instead, she busied herself with the mirrors. It started with one, an antique vanity in a narrow upstairs hallway. Claire passed it on the way to check the attic door again, only to stop in her tracks. Her reflection hadn't moved with her. She stepped to the left. The reflection didn't. It stood perfectly still, her own face staring back at her, expressionless, empty-eyed. Then its mouth opened. Only in the mirror, not in reality. Claire stumbled backward, heart pounding. The mirror now showed her as she was, terrified, trembling. She blinked hard and rushed back downstairs. The moment stuck with her, gnawing at her like teeth at the edge of her sanity. It wasn't the only mirror. The next morning, the tall-looking glass in the foyer had changed. Claire saw herself, yes, but behind her stood a man in a plague doctor's mask. Long, hooked nose, black glass eyes. His hand rested on her shoulder, though she felt nothing. When she turned, of course, no one was there. She tried to rationalize it. Old houses did weird things. Maybe it was mold, spores, stress. But when she went to the kitchen that evening to clean her face, the bathroom mirror showed something else entirely. Not her face, not even human. It was a woman, or what had once been one. Skin, grey and slick. Her mouth was a gaping hole, split to the ears and filled with jagged teeth. Her eyes wept black liquid, which pooled into her collarbones and dripped from her chin in thick, tar-like globs. Claire screamed and threw the porcelain basin off the wall. It shattered. But when she looked again, the mirror was still there, intact, pristine. And now her reflection was smiling. She ran to Sarah, but found her again locked in silence, rocking gently, her hands over her ears. Claire shook her. "Sarah, talk to me. What's happening in this house?" Sarah didn't answer, only whispered. "They come through the glass. They're waiting to wear us." Claire's blood turned to ice. That night, she covered every mirror in the house with sheets. Vanity, hallway, foyer, bathrooms, even the shards in the old guest room, where a long-forgotten mirror had cracked from age. But when she passed by the library hours later, she saw her reflection again, in the darkened glass of the grandfather clock. This time, it wasn't alone. There were 3 of them now, all versions of Claire. One smiling, one crying, one bleeding, all staring at her with eyes that weren't hers. She smashed the glass with a fireplace poker and screamed until her throat gave out. When Sarah came running, Claire could barely speak. But the damage had been done. The reflections had seen her. And now they were learning, watching, waiting. Claire didn't speak for hours after escaping the West Wing. She locked herself in the drawing room, its massive fireplace long dead, but the ashes beneath still warm as if something had recently used it. She stared into the soot, mind racing, unable to breathe deeply without feeling the walls pressing closer. She hadn't told Sarah what happened behind that door, what she saw on those walls, what followed her out. But the house knew. That night, Claire lay on her bed, the moonlight spilling through the tall window like spilled milk across rotted floorboards. She clutched her father's journal to her chest, listening, always listening. The whispers had returned. They weren't voices she recognized. They slithered through the walls like steam, slow and wet. Sometimes they wept, sometimes they screamed, and sometimes they laughed. At 3:13 a.m., Claire shot upright, not because of a whisper, but because of silence. Complete and total silence. Not even the wind stirred, not the crickets, not the old pipes, just void. She got up and opened the door. The hallway outside was darker than it should have been. The candle sconce she'd left lit had gone out. She tried her flashlight. Dead. Then she saw it, a handprint, pressed into the wallpaper across from her door. Small, childlike, but black as oil, glistening. She turned to call Sarah's name, but froze. The whisper had returned, except this time. It came from inside her room. She turned slowly, her breath caught. The shadows beside her dresser seemed too thick. They pulsed like a living thing. And then they moved. A face began to emerge, wet, boneless, human-shaped but wrong. Its mouth opened first, wide, toothless, and from it came a sound like 1,000 whispers overlapping, a swarm of bees in human speech. Claire slammed the door shut and ran. She didn't stop running until she was in the attic. She hadn't meant to go there. The stairs pulled at her. The house guided her. She didn't remember climbing them. Up here, it was freezing cold. Breath steaming from her mouth even though it was mid-autumn. The smell of iron hung thick in the air. There were boxes, crates, old toys, broken chairs, and something covered in sheets. Dozens of them. Each sheet covering a figure. She pulled the first one off with a trembling hand. It was a mannequin, dressed in a rotting Civil War uniform, but its eyes had been carved into, not painted, cut with a blade, and something glistened inside the sockets. Flesh, maggots. She backed away. A soft knock behind her. She turned. Another covered figure, sheet still on, but now moving, breathing. She reached out, hand trembling uncontrollably, and yanked the sheet. It wasn't a mannequin. It was a man, desiccated, mouth sewn shut, eyes wide open and alive, screaming silently. He fell forward into her arms, convulsing, a note pinned to his chest with a rusted brooch. He tried to leave before the ritual. Claire screamed, backed into a pile of boxes. The covered shapes began to tremble, one by one, like something beneath them was waking. A soft female voice whispered into her ear, "It's your turn next." Claire sprinted out of the attic, down the stairs, heart hammering like thunder. At the base, Sarah stood barefoot, hair wild, staring at nothing. She didn't blink. She didn't breathe. And then, in her father's voice, she said, "Welcome home, Claire." The candle beside her flared to life, and something began crawling down the walls. Claire sat motionless in the hallway for over an hour after escaping the attic. Her hands trembled violently in her lap, but her face was pale and still, like stone eroded by wind. She could still hear the whispers, the voice that had slithered from Sarah's mouth in their father's voice. "Welcome home, Claire." It wasn't Sarah. Not fully. Something else was inside her. But it wasn't just Sarah that had changed. It was the house itself. The portraits lining the staircase wall now seemed different. Their eyes followed her, not in the way old art sometimes seems to, but literally. If she turned her back, she could feel the weight of their gaze pressing against her neck like fingers. Claire stood, legs numb, and approached the largest portrait, an oil painting of a man in a dark, almost black, Civil War era suit. His face had been painted in exquisite detail. High cheekbones, deep-set eyes, pale lips curled into the faintest of smiles. She leaned in. His eyes moved, not a trick of light, not imagination. They moved, a slow blink, deliberate. Claire staggered backward, knocking into the opposite wall. A chill washed over her, and when she looked again, the painting was still. The eyes closed. They were watching, waiting. She fled to the study and locked the door behind her. The air inside was stale and thick. She found herself drawn to the fireplace, where old ashes crumbled under her fingers. There was something buried beneath them, a locket. Inside it, a small faded photo of her father, younger, smiling, and a girl, Sarah, no older than 7. Behind them, just barely visible in the photo's background, was the front porch of Eliodora. Except they had never been here before. Claire's hand shook as she turned the locket over. Etched into the back, property of the Order, bound by blood. Suddenly, the flames in the dead fireplace ignited, cold blue fire roaring to life with a hiss. Claire screamed and fell backward, the locket flying from her hand. In the flames, she saw it. A figure, impossibly tall, shrouded in a black veil standing in the woods outside the house. Its head tilted slowly, unnaturally, as if it sensed her watching. Then the fire died as quickly as it came. From the hallway beyond the study, something moved. A dragging sound, sharp claws scraping along old wood. Then a whisper right at her ear. The portraits remember. They always remember. Claire bolted. She ran down the east corridor, a hallway lined with dozens of paintings, all of them old family portraits. Their eyes were open now, every one of them, wide, glassy. Some were weeping black tears. Others smiled with rotting teeth. As she passed, one reached out from its frame. Its hand was real, flesh, fingernails long and wet. It grazed her arm. She screamed, stumbled and fell. The portraits began to scream with her, a chorus of distorted cries and childlike laughter echoing down the corridor. She scrambled up and dove into the nearest door. The room was a nursery. Rotten wooden toys were scattered across the mouldy floor. A mobile of bones dangled from the ceiling. The crib, still intact, rocked gently on its own. Claire backed toward the door, but it slammed shut behind her. Something crawled out of the crib. It was small, human-shaped, head too large, hands like claws. Its face was stitched shut, eyes sewn closed, lips sealed with rusted wire. It dragged itself across the floor, leaving a trail of black sludge, mouth twitching beneath the stitches as if trying to scream. Claire pounded on the door, kicking it open just as the thing reached her feet. She ran until her legs gave out. Back in her room, she collapsed against the door, sobbing silently. From the hallway came a voice. Not Sarah's, not her father's. The Order awaits Claire. The house is only the beginning. The voice vanished into the walls. The whispering started again, but this time, they whispered her name. Claire didn't remember falling asleep, but when she woke, she was lying in the hallway, just outside Sarah's room. The floor was damp beneath her shirt stuck to her skin with sweat or blood. She didn't want to know which. The house was quiet now, not peaceful, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears, like something is holding its breath. She stood slowly, every joint aching, and made her way to the stairs. The portraits no longer watched her. Their eyes were gone. Hollow sockets stared back, empty and scorched. One painting, of a small child in a white dress, was smeared in something thick and red. Claire didn't look closely. She had to find the locked room. The only part of the house they hadn't explored yet was the sub-basement. According to one of her father's maps, there was a sealed door beneath the cellar floor, behind a false panel. Claire descended into the basement, flashlight in hand. The wooden stairs groaned beneath her feet like bones snapping. The air grew colder as she went down. Not natural cold, grave cold. At the bottom, she found the false panel behind a stack of molding crates. She pulled them aside, revealing a plank nailed into the stone. It took all her strength to pry it loose. Behind it, a heavy iron door. No handle, no lock, just a symbol carved deep into the metal. A circle surrounded by jagged teeth. Claire pressed her palm against it. It opened. The chamber beyond was suffocatingly dark. As she stepped inside, her flashlight flickered violently before dying completely. She froze. Then, scraping, stone against stone. A light, diamond soys, flickering candles around the room lit themselves one by one. The chamber was circular, lined with mirrors, but none of them reflected Claire. Instead, they showed her standing beside something else, something tall, cloaked in a veil of black mist. No eyes, just a mouth, wide, open, and in every mirror, it was closer. Claire spun, heart racing. The room was empty, but when she looked back at the mirrors, they now showed her back and the thing behind her. She turned. Nothing. Then the mirrors cracked, all at once. The floor split open beneath her. She landed hard on stone. Bones cracked beneath her body, not hers. She lay in a pit filled with skeletons, dozens of them, some adult, some small, carved into the floor. They were the first. You are the last. A whisper in the darkness. You opened the door. Now you belong to the house. She scrambled to her feet, bones breaking beneath her steps, and climbed out, back into the main chamber. The mirrors were gone. Now there were faces in the walls. Pressed against the stone, their mouths stretched in silent screams. One of them was her father. His lips moved. Run. Now. Claire turned and ran, but the iron door had vanished. She was sealed inside. Claire stared at the sealed door. Her pulse thudded in her ears. The handle wouldn't budge. It was as if the wood itself had melted together, forming a solid wall behind her. The dragging sound had stopped, but the air was thick with something rotten and warm, like meat left out in summer. She turned slowly, the beam of her flashlight flickering against the dusty wallpaper. The hallway behind the door had led her deeper into the west wing, into what her father had labeled the whispering room in his journals. Now she understood why. The room was long and narrow, lined with faded portraits whose faces had been scratched out. It wasn't vandalism. It was erasure. Whoever or whatever had done it had taken care to remove only the eyes, as if those were the dangerous parts. The whispers began softly, like wind through cracks in the walls. But then they grew louder, closer. Dozens of voices whispering her name. Claire, Claire, Claire. They weren't coming from the room. They were coming from inside her ears. She clamped her hands to the sides of her head and screamed, "Stop, stop it." Silence. Then a single voice, childlike but wrong, broken somehow, spoke clearly behind her. "She's in the mirror, Claire. Don't look. Don't look." She spun. There was a mirror on the far wall, tall and warped with age. Her reflection stared back, but it wasn't moving the same way she did. Her mirrored self was smiling. Claire stepped forward, breath shallow. The smile widened. Then the mirrored Claire raised one hand and slowly slit her own throat. Claire stumbled back in horror, but there was no blood. Not in the mirror, not on the floor. Just that awful smile frozen in silver. She turned away, only to see the hallway behind her was gone. Now there was only a door, a small one, child-sized, painted red. She crouched, heart racing, and reached for the knob. Behind it was a nursery. The walls were lined with cribs, rotting wood, threadbare blankets. Dolls with cracked porcelain faces lay in each one, mouths sewn shut with wire. And above each crib, words carved into the wall with what looked like fingernails. She took their voices. Claire's breath caught in her throat. In the corner, a music box began to play, a tune so old and warped it barely sounded human. She backed away, but something was already moving. From beneath the cribs, long, skeletal arms emerged, writhing, reaching. One of them grabbed her ankle. Claire screamed and kicked, slamming her heel into the thing's knuckles. Bones cracked, the grip loosened. She sprinted out of the nursery, but the hallway beyond was changing as she ran. Walls pulsing like lungs, floors sagging beneath her weight like skin stretched over bone. She didn't stop. She didn't dare. Finally, she saw a light. The door to the main hall had returned. She threw herself through it, landing hard on the wooden floorboards. The air shifted back to its suffocating stillness. The whispering had stopped. The red door was gone. But Claire knew it wouldn't be gone forever. It was waiting. So was she. Claire couldn't breathe. The darkness that pressed around her in the west wing wasn't just a lack of light. It had weight. It settled into her chest, wrapped itself around her lungs. The stale air tasted like rust and grave soil. Somewhere behind her, she could still hear the faint echo of Sarah's voice. But it wasn't coming from upstairs. It was coming from beneath the house. The floor shifted beneath her like muscle under skin. She gripped the banister and forced herself forward, down a side corridor lined with mold-soaked wallpaper. Her flashlight flickered violently before going dead. Then the house lit itself, one by one, the sconces on the wall igniting with a cold blue flame. And every portrait hanging along the hallway had changed. Each now depicted her father, but in the last image, he was flayed open like a cadaver, his mouth stitched into a grin. Blood-red words beneath the frame read, "She walks in you now." Claire stumbled into the nursery again. Only now it had changed. The cribs were gone. In their place stood standing mirrors, dozens of them, each one reflecting not her but Sarah. Different versions of her. Sarah screaming, Sarah bleeding, Sarah hanging by her neck from the ceiling beams. But one mirror at the end showed Claire herself. Only not. The figure wore Claire's clothes, had her face, but her eyes were black, hollow, and something alive pulsed just beneath her skin. As Claire stared, the doppelganger stepped forward in the glass and whispered, "You brought her back." Claire ran. She found a spiral staircase hidden behind a torn wall panel, leading into the earth. No flashlight, no phone, only the hum of something ancient drawing her downward. Stone replaced wood. Roots clawed at the walls like veins. Her father's journal entries echoed in her mind, warnings she hadn't understood until now. The stairs ended in a vast chamber of black soil and bone. In the center, a massive root system pulsed like a heart. And at its base, Sarah knelt, eyes rolled white, hands resting gently on the mass. Behind her stood her father, but it wasn't him anymore. Dr. Montgomery's eyes were gone, sockets empty and weeping tar. His voice, wet, distorted, inhuman, slithered through the room. She chose you, Claire, just like she chose me. Eleodora doesn't want owners. She wants vessels. Claire shook, bile rising in her throat. Where's Sarah? He smiled with his ruined mouth. She's blooming. Suddenly, Sarah's body began to twitch violently. Roots burst from her back, tearing her skin, wrapping around her limbs, lifting her into the air. Her screams were short, gurgled. Her eyes, what was left of them, locked onto Claire in a moment of terrifying clarity. Run. Then her body snapped backward like a broken doll, sucked into the root mass. Claire screamed and lunged forward, but the floor opened beneath her, spitting her out into another room. This one circular, stone-lined, filled with whispering voices. Painted across the walls in blood and soot were messages in different languages, all saying the same thing. You do not leave Eleodora. Eleodora lives inside you. Something rose from the soil. Not a demon, not a ghost, a mother. Azrael, towering, feminine in form but eyeless. Hair made of roots, a ribcage that opened and shut like insect wings. Her mouth split vertically, a red wound of teeth and dripping shadow. Her voice came not in sound, but inside Claire's skull. You fed me well. Now become me. Claire screamed, not out of fear, but rage. She pulled a lighter from her pocket, the one she used to light her father's journals, and struck it, then threw it. The room ignited. Roots screamed. Blood boiled. Claire didn't run. She stood in the center, flames licking at her coat, screaming her sister's name until the world went black. When the townspeople arrived days later, they found the mansion nothing but ash and earth. No bodies, no trace. Just one message scrawled in charcoal across the gatepost. The house is gone, but the roots remain. And in the distance, beneath the soft soil of the forest, something shifted, something breathed. They say a house remembers, but Eleodora did more than just recall. It breathed, it hungered, its very foundations soaked in the echoes of forgotten rites and stolen voices. Some evils don't just lurk in shadows. They become the very earth beneath your feet, stretching tendrils through time and blood. The walls crumbled, the flames consumed, yet the true horror wasn't destroyed. It merely shifted, burrowing deeper. For the house is gone, but the roots remain, forever whispering of what dwells within, waiting for the next vessel to bloom into its dark embrace.